The Truman Doctrine, 1947.
The Truman Doctrine, announced by President Harry Truman in 1947, marked a pivotal shift in American foreign policy. It signaled the United States' commitment to countering Soviet influence and became the cornerstone of the Cold War strategy. In the aftermath of World War II, Europe lay in ruins. The war had devastated cities, economies, and societies across the continent. As the world began to rebuild, two superpowers emerged, the United States and the Soviet Union. Their differing ideologies and visions for the post-war order set the stage for a global confrontation. The Soviet Union, under Joseph Stalin, expanded its influence over Eastern Europe, installing communist governments in countries like Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. This expansion worried Western leaders, who feared the spread of communism beyond the Eastern Bloc. In 1946, Greece and Turkey were facing significant political and economic crises. In Greece, a brutal civil war raged between the government and communist insurgents. In Turkey, pressure from the Soviet Union threatened its sovereignty and stability. Both nations were seen as critical to the security and stability of the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. The British government, financially strained and unable to continue its support for Greece and Turkey, turned to the United States for assistance. This plea for help prompted the US to reevaluate its foreign policy approach. On March 12, 1947, President Harry Truman addressed a joint session of Congress. In a speech that would become historic, he outlined the urgent need to support Greece and Turkey, framing the struggle as part of a larger global battle between democracy and totalitarianism.
It must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures.
Truman requested $400 million in aid for Greece and Turkey, emphasizing that the United States must assume a leadership role in defending freedom and democracy worldwide. The Truman Doctrine established the principle that the United States would support nations threatened by communism. This policy marked the beginning of the US strategy of containment, aimed at preventing the spread of Soviet influence. The aid provided to Greece and Turkey included military assistance to help combat insurgents and economic aid to stabilize their economies. This support was crucial in helping these nations resist communist pressures and maintain their independence. The Truman Doctrine had far-reaching implications beyond Greece and Turkey. It set the precedent for American intervention in conflicts perceived as part of the Cold War struggle. This policy was further reinforced by the Marshall Plan in 1948, which provided extensive economic aid to rebuild Western Europe, and the formation of NATO in 1949, a military alliance aimed at countering Soviet aggression. The doctrine also influenced US involvement in conflicts around the world, from the Korean War to the Vietnam War, and shaped America's approach to international relations throughout the Cold War era. The legacy of the Truman Doctrine continues to influence American foreign policy today. Its emphasis on supporting democratic nations and containing authoritarianism remains a guiding principle in the US's approach to global affairs. The Truman Doctrine was a defining moment in the Cold War, establishing the United States as the global leader in the fight against communism and setting the stage for decades of geopolitical strategy. While the doctrine was successful in its immediate goals, it also committed the US to a long-term policy of interventionism, with both positive and negative consequences for international stability. The Truman Doctrine, announced in 1947, was a bold declaration of American resolve in the face of Soviet expansionism. It marked the beginning of the Cold War and established a framework for US foreign policy that would endure for the rest of the 20th century and beyond.